Hi, this is Frid from The Joy of Syntax and English in Color. And in this video, I would like to show you the three most important verbs that German has, actually. It's about German, and about the two possible past participles of the verb werden. And I'll just go ahead and share my screen, there we go. Okay. So we'll start with the three most important verbs. You can easily find conjugation overviews in the internet, and if you can't find them, write me an email and I will send them to you. Okay, so sein, haben, and werden. Those are the three most important verbs. Please, please, please learn them. Learn them in all tenses and, in the first, second, and person singular and plural, etc. Sein means to be, haben means to have, and werden means to become. And I'll say more about werden in a little while. Okay, you can stop the video and read the text here. I will summarize it for you, and I will read the examples, and there will be example sentences soon. Okay, so sein, to be, can simply be a main verb, and often is. When I say I am happy, then it's simply a copular verb, and it connects the subject and the subject, the complement to the subject, or subject predicative, or the predicate complement, whatever you want to call the thing that says something about the subject. So, for instance, I am happy. Ich bin glücklich. But when it acts as an auxiliary, what I was going to say is these three verbs can be main verbs, and I just gave you an example of sein as a main verb, but they can also be so-called auxiliaries. Auxiliaries are helper verbs, and I'm not so fond of that expression. I think it's all so-called auxiliaries are main verbs that, in addition to being main verbs, also facilitate other things, other options. And so I think when we say verbs and auxiliaries, or main verbs and auxiliary verbs, this important fact gets completely ignored. So that's why I would say, okay, there are a number of main verbs that can also take on auxiliary function, or can also be helper verbs or whatever. So this sounds like an anal retentive pet peeve, but I think you'll see that it's not. Okay, so here are three examples of what sein can also do. Sein, in addition to being a link verb, can be used to form the present and past perfect. And it does that for verbs of movement like go, gehen, ich bin gegangen, or ich bin gefahren. Gefahren can mean to drive, but or to, ich bin mit dem Zug nach Frankfurt gefahren, so it can be to ride the train. It can be all kinds of meanings around gefahren. But it is a verb of movement, so you use to be as an auxiliary, sein. Ich bin gefahren. The important verb werden, which I'll discuss later, also uses it to form its present, ich bin geworden. And to be itself, sein itself, uses itself as a helper verb to build the present perfect and the past perfect. So, ich bin gewesen, ich war gewesen. And now I just gave you examples of the present perfect, but as you can see in the text, it's used to form both the present and the past perfect of these certain verbs. Haben means to have. And I didn't give you an example of I didn't give you an example of a sentence where it features as a main verb. In German, I say, when I am hungry, I say, ich habe Hunger. I have a dog, ich habe einen Hund. I don't have a car, ich habe kein Auto. So there are lots of situations where haben is simply a main verb. But in addition to that, it can also fulfill helper verb functions. and it's used to form the present and past perfect of most verbs. So, for instance, essen, to eat. Ich habe gegessen, ich hatte gegessen. I didn't mention that on the slide, but I'm now mentioning it in the text. Ich hatte gegessen. Oh, I do mention it here. Okay, so I'll add this actually later. So the next time I'll present this, I will have a past perfect example in the first group here. Okay, and then in addition to helping to create or form the present and the past perfect in German, it can also be used as a modal auxiliary. He has to do it, hat das zu tun. And so in that case, it's actually the same as in English. And of course, English always uses have as the auxiliary for present and past perfect forms. So English is much easier in that way. However, when you're used to one thing because you were born into a German-speaking community or you have spoken German most of your life, then it's harder. Easier can be harder if you're not used to it. I hope you know what I mean. Anyway, so that's haben, and werden can be a main verb, and then it means to become. For instance, he became a doctor, he became angry. But when it's used as an auxiliary, then it helps to form the two future tenses that German has, Futur 1 and Futur 2, and it's used to form the actional passive voice, and it's used as a replacer for the subjunctive 2, Konjunktiv 2. Okay, so examples are: Ich werde essen, I'm going to eat. Ich werde gegessen haben, I'm going to eat or I will eat is ich werde essen. English has two future one tenses, as it were. Long story, not to be told here. And in German, you can use the simple present in combination with an adverb that indicates future time and then express the future with that. And you can do that in English. Anyway, ich werde essen, ich werde gegessen haben, I will have eaten. I will eat, I will have eaten. And der Kuchen wurde gegessen, the cake was eaten. Das würde ich nicht tun, I wouldn't do that. So that we often say that. Some German teachers or grammarians frown on that, but actually there's a very legitimate reason to use würde as a replacer for the subjunctive. There is subjunctive 1 and 2 in German, and if you don't know, don't worry about it too much. And subjunctive 2 is used in indirect speech, reported speech. And sometimes subjunctive 1 does not look different from a subjunctive 1 form doesn't look different from the indicative. And in that case, it's recommended that you use würde. However, sometimes or very often people use würde to replace the second subjunctive or Konjunktiv 2 because they don't know the form, and I find that totally legitimate, or they find the form too old-fashioned, and I'm one of those people. Guilty as charged. Okay, so sein, haben, werden, they are main verbs that can also function as auxiliaries. And what is funny is that each of these verbs can help themselves, as it were. So there are certain verb phrases where you have these verbs in two capacities, as a main verb and as helper verb. And I have examples here. Here are examples without a sentence. Ich bin gewesen, which means I have been. Ich habe gehabt, which means I have had. And ich werde werden, which means I will become. So bin is here the auxiliary, gewesen is the past participle of sein as a main verb. Ich bin glücklich gewesen. Ich habe gehabt, I have had. The habe here, this one, is the auxiliary to form the present perfect. And gehabt is haben as a main verb, as the past participle of the main verb in sentences like ich habe viel Hunger gehabt. Ich werde werden. Werde is the auxiliary to form the future tense, the Futur 1. And werden is the infinitive of the main verb. So I will become. Ich werde Ich werde sicher glücklich werden. I'm sure I'll become happy. Okay, so now we'll have examples so that you can see them in context. Ich bin noch nie in Australien gewesen. I've never been to Australia. Ich habe schon oft Glück gehabt. I have often had quite a bit of luck. We can say I'm lucky, I've been lucky a lot, or I have had quite a bit of luck. Ich werde bestimmt berühmt werden. I'm sure I'll become famous, or I'll surely become famous. Okay, and I've noticed something that I shouldn't say here, maybe because it might become too long, but German often, for instance, for this one, this example, German often uses the present perfect when English uses the simple past, and that would be the story for another video. That what I've noticed is that I think instinctively we find it odd when the same verb acts as auxiliary and main verb in one sentence, and so we instinctively try to avoid that a lot in spoken speech. For instance, instead of saying ich bin noch nie in Australien gewesen, we would say ich war noch nie in Australien. Oder ich habe schon oft Glück gehabt. Then we would say, ich hatte schon oft Glück. Und ich werde bestimmt berühmt werden. Ach, ich werde bestimmt berühmt. So then we use alternative ways of expressing the same thing, avoiding the double whammy, so to speak. And you can actually, in German, you can do this, and in English, you absolutely cannot. In German, you can stick the simple past and the present perfect into the same sentence to express the same time level of time. For instance, I can say, in English, I have to say, I went to the bakery and I bought some rolls. And in German, I can say, ich war beim Bäcker und habe Brötchen gekauft. Okay, now I didn't write that down, so sorry about that, but I just thought of it. Okay, let's look at this. Now, werden, a very important verb, because, all of these are extremely important, and please learn them. And if you need help with them, write me an email or put a message to me in the comments below this video. Now, werden is tricky because it has two different, although similar, past participles. Werden is the infinitive, wurde is the simple past, and geworden or worden are worden. I now have English pronunciation of the German verb. Geworden and worden are the past participles. Now, when do you use which? Very easy. In Standard High German nowadays, geworden is the past participle when werden is used as a main verb. And worden is the past participle when werden is used as an auxiliary to form the passive voice. And I will give you examples. Oh, and a little note, a little side note, George Kerm did not only write the best and most wonderful grammar of English, but he also wrote a very, very good grammar of German. And he mentions that in I'm sorry, that in New High German, and I think in HD is no, I don't know. In the classical period and in certain, I forgot what he meant. Sorry. Anyway, that in certain dialects nowadays, and then in the classical period and in older forms of German, worden could actually be used as the past participle of the main verb. And he gives an example from a very well-known novel, Ein Kampf um Rom, a struggle for Rome, or a fight for Rome. And the sentence is, der ist ein welcher worden, statt er ist ein welcher geworden. But Standard High German doesn't do that, and it surprised me. But just in case anybody ever throws that at you. And then, of course, there are tons of dialects, and lots of German also make mistakes. So anyway, so here now are examples of werden as a main verb and werden as an auxiliary. Der Kuchen ist leider schimmlig geworden. The cake became moldy. Oh, I didn't add the unfortunately. Der Kuchen ist leider schimmlig geworden. Here, werden is a main verb in the present perfect tense. and we have geworden. Der Kuchen ist gerade aufgegessen worden. It looks like the very same structure, but in case of instead of schimmlig, we have the past participle of aufessen. Etwas aufessen, and the past participle is aufgegessen. So der Kuchen ist gerade aufgegessen worden. The cake has just been polished off. And so there's so many interesting things about this that it really highlights a lot of important differences between English and German. Number one is most passive voice forms in English form the passive voice with the help of the verb to be. Become is very rarely used. God is used more often, but not that often. So it's very important to learn to be, because it's also used to form most passive voice verb phrases. And in German, we use become. So that's a big difference. And then look at word order here. We in German stick so much, everything. We stick everything in between the auxiliary and the past participle. And English doesn't do that. And when you have a passive voice verb phrase, especially in the present perfect, but then you stick the past participle of the auxiliary in final position. And in English, it's the other way around. And so you look here, has just been is the past participle of the auxiliary, polished off is the past participle of the main verb. And in German, it's the other way around. And I think that's very, very difficult for both sets of learners to come to terms with this difference. Okay, so I hope this helped you. If you have questions, please pop them in the comment section below or write me an email. And I hope you enjoyed this. Give me a thumbs up if you like this and share it with your friends. And I will see you in the next video. Have a lovely day and don't give up. Take baby steps and learn those 3 verbs. Bye-bye.